Welcome back. This time we're talking about Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Now, as I said in my review for Star Wars Episode 1, I'm going to be going through all of the Star Wars films that I have not previously reviewed leading up to the soon-to-be-released Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. This film picks up 10 years after the end of Episode 1, with Anakin, now a Jedi Padawan, training under Obi-Wan, and is reunited with Padme, who is now Senator of Naboo, having finished her term as Queen, after her life is nearly taken in an assassination attempt. Both Obi-Wan and Anakin are tasked with protecting her life, and when another assassin tries to take her life, Obi-Wan goes off to investigate who may have been behind the attempts, while Anakin and Padme are sent off to Naboo to keep her safe while they continue their investigation. Anakin and Padme slowly start falling in love with each other, or at least slowly for Padme, quite quickly for Anakin, who is really creepy in this movie. And he is ultimately has to go to Tatooine when he starts having dreams of something being very wrong with his mother. It turns out she had been kidnapped by Sand People, and he rescues her just in time for her to die in his arms. And we get to see some of the first inklings of what an evil Anakin might be. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan's investigation sends him to a hidden planet called Kamino, which is populated by a race specializing in clones. And it turns out that someone has ordered a clone army for the Jedi Council and the Republic, which may come in handy with the ever-growing separatist movement involving the Trade Federation from the first film, as well as other factions who have joined in to fight against the Republic. And they are led by a former Jedi, Count Dooku, who, like Darth Maul in the previous film, is an apprentice under Darth Sidious, which this film, if you weren't sure at the end of the first one, you can tell is actually Chancellor Palpatine. And this entire endeavor is once again a plot by Palpatine to consolidate power, which happens when Jar Jar Binks returns to offer a vote to give him emergency powers, which he gladly accepts, on the inside at least, and uses them to more or less take over the Republic. And the film ends with the Clone Wars, which were first mentioned in the original Star Wars film, begin. So I'm going to say right up front, this is my least favorite Star Wars film of all of them. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a deeply flawed film with horrible pacing, terrible dialogue, substandard at best acting at times, and really bad cinematography at the worst moments. This is a deeply, deeply flawed film. Like I said in my review of Episode 1, I really try to go into these films with an open mind. It's been years since I've seen them, and during those years I've really tried to reinforce my negative opinion of these movies by finding out other opinions that agree with me. It's that confirmation bias that whether it's politics or anything else is something that we have to be careful of, and something I really wasn't with these Star Wars prequels. So there are some things that are just not as bad as I remember them. Yes, the dialogue is horrible, but there are moments where it's not as bad as I remembered it, at least, although I did remember it being very bad. I'm not saying it's good either. Hayden Christensen's performance as Anakin Skywalker is not great at all, although admittedly the dialogue he has to work with is not doing him any favors. I will say his performance here is actually hurt by how better he is in Episode 3. He's still dealing with very clunky dialogue, and it's still not the greatest performance, but it is a noticeable improvement over his work in this film. Although with dialogue about sand and everything else that he has in this film, he really had not a lot to work with. Once again, we are dealing with a terribly convoluted plot. In the first film we did as well. In this case, it's even worse. And there's just a lot of very odd plot conveniences. Basically, you have to accept one of about three different interpretations of how the events play out in this film. One is that Palpatine is so intelligent and so clairvoyant on how future events are going to unfold that even when his plots seem to be failing, they're actually part of his plan. Such as Jango Fett in his very botched attempt to kill the senator, using a dart that magically could be traced back to Kamino, a planet that no one else in this film other than a guy cooking at a diner seems to even know about, which is why Obi-Wan is sent to Kamino in the first place. Then Jango leading Obi-Wan to the separatists. It's just, those two developments are just so plot convenient that they're really annoying. It's just sloppy writing for the lack of anything else. And then there are those certain plot lines that just never seem to get resolved, such as the fabled Jedi Master Sifo-Dyas, who allegedly is the one who created the order for the clones and then died 10 years before. That's never cleared up. Jango Fett says later in the film that he was hired to be the clone material by Tyrannus, who we later find out is actually Count Dooku. Now, obviously, Count Dooku is working for Palpatine, and he is at least in the knowledge of that he's essentially playing both sides. But it does seem odd that they would hire him to be the clone material for the future Republic army, and then have the Separatists hire him to make the assassination attempt. It's very convenient for the plot, so our heroes can figure out what's going on, but it really doesn't make sense. Are you telling me that there aren't any other bounty hunters out there that they could have hired? Now, this goes back to what I was saying before, that, yes, you could say that Palpatine knew all of this was going to happen, that was all part of his plan. I just don't want to go that far because it's kind of stupid. The other is that he had a lot of contingency plans for when certain things were going to go wrong. And then third is just that, he's really lucky and everything just happened to turn out the way it was. I think that seems to be the best case as far as what given in the films to understand. Now, I have to say, I really wanted to give the romance between Anakin and Padme a chance. And from Padme's point of view, it seemed like a genuine arc. Anakin is just downright creepy in this film. A precursor to Edward in the Twilight films of just being, mildly to moderately stalkerish, and that being apparently a turn on. Although she rightfully rejects some of his advances and tells them off early on several times. Since this romance will play the key catalyst for Anakin's decisions in the third film, we have to buy this. And ultimately, in the end, I think they do. I just wish it was better written. I mean, some of the dialogue is just horribly clunky. Like, I truly, deeply love you. I mean, really? That's the best you could come up with? Now, I don't want to be completely negative. Now, one thing that sometimes gets a lot of grief is Anakin's reaction after he slaughters the Sand People. Now, I wasn't a big fan of how some of this was cut together, but when Anakin is going to find his mother, and that whole scene where some of the music cues are really good, cluing us in on the dark decisions that he would be making in subsequent scenes. Unfortunately, they keep cutting back to Obi-Wan and his really kind of boring, just boring investigation into the Kamino situation really kind of hurt the momentum that Anakin's scenes were really building at that point. And really, this whole sequence with him and with Anakin and his mother take place an hour and 15 minutes in this movie. And aside from the mildly entertaining but mostly annoying chase through Coruscant early in the film, this is the first truly interesting thing that happens in this movie, and it happens an hour and 15 minutes in. that's one of my major problems with this film, is just the pacing and how much of this film is ultimately just not necessary. So ultimately, they all end up captured, and that's a mildly entertaining sequence. The whole them battling in the arena, that was fun. I'll give them that. Then the Jedi show up, which should be like so cool. This is the moment we've been waiting for, seeing all these Jedi together, and it's essentially this just mindless just battle between endless supplies of droids and a bunch of Jedi. And they're just slashing and slashing and slashing, and there's no real rhythm to this battle. It's just sort of I mean, there's nothing to really set any particular moment out of that scene. And then the clones arrive, and we're given the first of what will be many battles between completely disposable CG armies on CG sets. That battle should have been pretty cool. It really wasn't to me. It just, again, the backgrounds don't look real. The soldiers, for the most part, don't look real. The droids don't look real. There's no reason to feel any kind of emotional investment in these moments. To sort of personalize the story, we have Anakin and Obi-Wan chasing after Count Dooku, who has the plans for the original Death Star. And this culminates in a battle in which Anakin loses his arm, and really nothing else interesting happens. As I mentioned in my review of Episode 1, this battle and then the subsequent lightsaber battle between Dooku and Yoda are so horribly shot. I mean, there's just so many like close-ups on their face when we really should have these wide shots showing them full body with the lightsabers going, but we almost never get that in both fights that we get in this movie. They're just you can't tell what's happening, and it's not enjoyable when you can't tell what's happening. It's just half the battle you don't even get to see the lightsabers going. You just get to see lights flashing in front of their faces. I mean, it gets better in Episode 3, but I'd have to say that those two are probably the two worst lightsaber battles in the entire franchise, and I'm including the rather lackluster lightsaber battle between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader in the original Star Wars. At least that was full body shot, so although there wasn't a lot of fast swinging of lightsabers, you could at least tell what was happening. So ultimately, I just cannot find much enjoyment in this movie, but there are some moments that I did enjoy. Once again, I liked Padme. I liked how she was able to take care of herself in the gladiator arena. Again, she just is sort of that badass character. You can tell that Leia is her daughter. I liked those moments. I also did enjoy Anakin's response to his killing the Sand People. That is a scene that does get some grief for, I was like, I killed the women and the children. But I do think that is Hayden Christensen's best performed scene in this movie, which honestly isn't saying a whole lot. But I liked how they handled that. It worked a lot better rewatching it than it did in my memory, and I'm going to give them credit for that moment. That's the scene where we get to see the potential of a dark Anakin. And although personally I think the whole his conversion to the dark side that happens in Episode 3 happens too late in this franchise, in this trilogy, I did like this moment as sort of the foundation for what was to come. But that's honestly about all I can really say positive about this film. Unlike Episode 1, which I said internally worked as far as the pacing, here the whole first act and most of the second act could just be done away with. The romance between Padme and Anakin is important. It's just so poorly executed in this movie that it feels more like a soap opera and not a well-written one. Meanwhile, the whole mystery that Obi-Wan is pursuing is utterly convoluted and solved through horribly convenient plot contrives, such as again the dart, and then him able to track Jango Fett to the Separatists, and this is all capped with a pretty mindless Jedi battle, followed by an even more mindless battle between two disposable CG armies, followed by two horribly shot lightsaber battles. There just really is not much of redeeming value in this film. There are individual moments that I enjoyed more than I remembered, such as Anakin's reaction to his killing of the Sand People. The actual gladiatory battle before the Jedi show up is pretty fun. I especially enjoyed Padme once again showing that she could take care of herself in a situation like this. But that's really about it. This is just a film that, for the most part, fails on just about every measurable standard. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. What did you think of episode 2? And although I'm going to be doing a ranking video in the coming weeks, go ahead and let me know, what's your least favorite Star Wars film? Of course, this one is mine, and will be the first one I talk about when I do that ranking video. As always, you can subscribe to my channel, check out some of my other reviews, and until next time, I'll see you at the movies.